Hello everybody, who wants to learn how to draw a traditional tattoo rose? That's a little large, so we'll shrink that down. I'm going to be doing everything today on my iPad using Procreate, and you can do the same if you want, or you can just pick up a paper and pencil the way that we all did it back in the day. So, I've got my circle. This is going to be the base of my rose. And I actually kind of want to do a little bit taller. So just that. I'm using a sketcher pencil, and I always do my sketches in red. The reason I do that, I don't know. It's just fun. So, alright, I want to do some forward-facing petals first. So, let's go ahead and sketch those in real quick. There's one, and let's do another this one. Right, now the middle of this you can do several different ways. I am just going to go with a little spiral action. Boom. Super easy. Once we've got that, then this will connect down here. And I like where that sits. So now, we just need to add the front petal. We do the same over here on this one. Boom. And that's pretty much it for a traditional rose as far as the center goes. So, now that we've got those, let's go ahead and add some petals around the outside. Boom, boom, boom. Up here. So those are going to be my outer petals. And let's do one more right here across the front. That is in good shape. Back it up. Boom, boom. I'm sure you guys can hear the cats walking around, but they hang in my basement with me, so it's kind of cool. Unless I'm trying to do something important. Alright, run, cat. Oh, okay, bye. Alright, so now this front-facing petal right here, just going to widen up the base a little bit so that this here doesn't follow the exact line right here, because then it'll kind of look like it's just an egg shape. And yeah, that's what it is, but that's not what we're going for. So now, just gotta draw the rest of our petals. So for these, you can go a couple of different ways. Ooh, that's a route right there. Let's do some like this. That can work, and in fact, I kind of like that. So let's run with those ones today. Boom. Now these center lines right here, they're not gonna end up in the final piece, but I just like to have them there so I can kind of space out everything the way that I want it to be. All right. So here, let's get that little point, and we'll draw the final one right over here. Get that point too. Alright, so now that I've got all those drawn in there, this guy right here is looking a little tiny, so let's make that a little larger. Boom. And because it's just my sketch, it doesn't really matter what the hell I do right now, because this is just plotting it out to get it to a point that I want it to be. Alright, so that's all in there. Let's just add a fold here or there. So this looks like a good spot. Now, if you're familiar with my artwork, you know that this isn't my regular tattoo style. But the reason that I am doing these videos so that you can see a couple of different things that I'm capable of doing is because I think that every tattoo artist should be somewhat versatile. And I'll continue that whole thing in a minute, but for right now, let's draw a couple little leaves on here. That looks like a good spot. We'll give it 2 right here, and 2 here, here. Yeah, leave that one out. That looks good. Okay, so now leaves. There's several different ways to draw them, but for the purpose of this, I'm just going to do kind of some really not very fancy leaves, and when I go into them a little bit more, I'm just going to add a little bit of a curve on those leaves. Yep. Talking to the cat. Alright, here we go. Yeah, I think it needs leaves over here. So let's just shrink this whole thing down just a little bit so that it fits. Now I know that I have a hard time keeping the screen in one spot. I don't know. Let's just go like this. That's right, Rome. I'm not used to talking while I'm drawing, so this is actually a little bit of a challenge for me. Alright, so while we're doing this, I'll just show you a couple other styles of leaves that you can do. Yes, we hear you. Thank you for your input. Alright, so that being a center line, we can do some like this. So that's a pretty cool leaf, but I would probably use that in like a neo-traditional kind of rose. So get rid of that guy. Alright, so now using the same center line, you can do kind of the same thing, but because it's traditional, we'll just simplify it a little bit. We'll back off the top of the leaf a little bit, and boom. So now it looks like it's got a little bit of a fold to it, which is kind of nice, and kind of like that a little bit better, so I might switch to that, but for the purpose of just learning, we'll leave it alone. Now for the leaves that I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to bring it to a point and just kind of layer them back on themselves. Would a rose look like this in real life? Absolutely not, but that's alright, because this is traditional artwork. Traditional artwork is very, very basic. There are some artists that hone their skills in doing just traditional, that's cool, but a lot of artists graduate from this. Even cooler stuff. Ooh, that one was a little wonky. Boom. But everybody does have to start somewhere. So I started out doing a lot of flash art, and traditional was definitely a big part of it, but I always found myself looking at the new school stuff. So I used up all those colors. Now I'm being pretty quick and sure of myself with these lines here. When I get into the other styles, my neo-traditional and my new school stuff, you're going to see me sketch a lot more. And the reason for that is because I have to provoke a little bit more thought. And so in doing that, I sketch and erase and then sketch again. And yeah, it can be a little frustrating for some people, but oh well. If they don't like it, they don't have to watch. And let's do one more. Wait. one more petal right here. Okay, so there's that. Now, underneath this petal right here, I'm going to just bring this out a little bit again so that not everything stays in line right along here. Okay, so let's start doing our hard liner. I really like this dog paw liner, and I believe that I got it off of Tattoo Smart. And it's part of the Dave Tevenall set. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, it's one of Dave Tevenall's, and it's pretty cool. Let's see how thick we're running today. I like that. Okay, so traditional artwork is known for having some very bold lines. That's what we're going to make here. And did I just screw up? No. Okay, so I went back and checked to make sure that I am drawing on the correct layer, because I draw on the wrong layer all the fucking time. And it sucks, because sometimes you don't notice until you screw something up, and then you go back to check on it, and you've gone like 20-30 minutes without making a mistake. And all of a sudden, you realize that you have to draw everything all over again. So, alright, I think I'm going to connect it. Yeah, okay. So let's just clean this up a little bit. Alright, there we go. Move to this one. Boom. 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 That's too high up. Try it again. Boom. Boom. Now, if I were doing this on paper, I would actually do 3 versions of it. I would do my sketch, and then I would do my draft, and once I was happy with my draft, then I would go to my final draft. And right now I'm just jumping right from my sketch to my final draft, because I can step backwards if I need to, and I'm only doing traditional right now, so if I screw something up, I'll just say that that's the style. I think that's looking pretty good. And let's bring this out at the top a little bit more and in at the bottom. There we go. Okay. So now, we're in our outer part. Also, when I get to the later sketches, you'll probably see me run a curve like this and then hold it. And what that does is it allows me to adjust while having that perfect arc. Now, if I want to go up to edit the shape, I can grab that and I can make it wider if I want to. I can bring it in the other way. I can do all kinds of fun stuff. So, that's not what we're trying to do today though, so we'll leave that alone. Okay, back to this traditional rose. Hello. That's right. Barbie's given his input. This is it, this rose fucking sucks. I tell him to fuck off, because I've seen his drawings. They're not very good. There we go. So, let's drop that sketch. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm going to bulk up a couple of lines so everything looks nice and even. Cool. Hello. Okay. There we go. Alright, so I'm gonna make another layer, and what I'm doing now is I'm gonna add those leaves. But I'm going to kind of cheat when I do the neo-traditional rose. Too many syllables, can't do this. So when I do the neo-traditional rose, I'm going to simply go back into this drawing. I'm going to get rid of the leaves that I already have here, and I'll add in the new ones that I think are way cooler. Bam, that's a cool leaf. And I'll also do some little guys like this. But that's not today's lesson, now is it? So let's make sure that we got the layer we want. Where the hell is that line from? There we go. Okay. We're on the correct layer. So now, boom, boom. Just tracing over all these little lines. And I know I'm supposed to be keeping this upright so that people don't get lost. But this is how I draw. So, I'm sorry. And it's weird too, because when I tattoo, I'm stuck with like a certain angle, and I'm kind of isolated there. That's the only way that I can approach that limb or whatever we're working on. And yet, while drawing, I spin everything all around the place because it doesn't matter. Alright, boom. Now, traditional artwork has been around for a very, very long time. Now, a lot of people will refer to it as American traditional, and what they're referring to is the old, oops, that was a bad line, the old, like, Sailor Jerry type artwork. It's still kicking, and I'm really surprised about that. Like, there's a lot of artists out there that specialize in traditional, and I don't know, it just didn't really do it for me. So it's kind of odd going back and drawing this old style that I only trained in for a few weeks because my mentor was like, alright, this is how you do traditional, and now we're gonna move on to neo-traditional, and like, oh, look at this big old fat fish with bulging eyes, like, that's new school. And I was like, ooh, new school, that's pretty cool. So that's what I started focusing on. Alright, this looks pretty good to me. Yep, that is a traditional rose outline. So now, let's go ahead and duplicate these layers. Actually, I'm just going to duplicate them all. Alright, since I got it duplicated, I'm going to sandwich that together with layer 3, which is my leaves. Bam! So now those are set, we get to start coloring. And coloring on the iPad is super easy. So I'm going to go up to my selection tool up here. I'm going to hit automatic, and I'm going to make sure I'm on the correct layer. I am. So this whole process that I'm going to go through right now, this is just the way that I do things. And if you want to do things the same way, great, steal it. But this is just the way that I do it, and some people might think that it's incorrect. Alright, so when I go ahead and touch a petal, I can move left or right, and that will increase my threshold or decrease it. So what that's pretty much doing is making it so that my color when I go ahead and, yep, I hear you. When I go ahead and drop my color in, it'll sit slightly behind my outline here. So this part right here, if I slide it way down, I might lose that. Oh, no. Guess it's gonna stay because of course I'm trying to make an example out of it. So it doesn't help me out. So if you don't crank up your threshold a little bit, you'll be left with little white lines around the edge of everything that you do. So, alright, I want that pedal selected, and I'm going to go ahead and grab this one at the same time. So, now that I've got those, let's make a new layer underneath. And I'm going to make this a red rose. So I'm just going to drop some red in here, and color on top. So sometimes you'll see traditional artwork where the color goes all the way to the edge, and some artists might say, hey, that's fucking wrong, but I don't give a shit. So you'll see some that are running around like this. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing, but I think it's a lazy thing. So if the client's paying me for a tattoo, I'm going to color all the way up to the edge for them. Alright, so now we're going to go into my brushes. These are all my preloaded brushes that I really enjoy. So I like this ink wash one, and I'm pretty sure that's part of the Dave Coverdale set too. I want to say it's called Battle Damage. But anyways, over here on this slider, I can adjust how large it is. And based on what we're doing right now, I think this is a pretty good size. So, let's make it a little bit bigger. Alright, so when doing traditional artwork, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that you want about a third black, a third color, and then a third skin. But I think that a third black and 2/3 color is a great ratio. So let's look at that. All I'm doing is just brushing this in where it's close to the inside of the rose. Alright, cool. So now, go back up to the other layer, where our outline is, and we'll select some more. The reason that I'm not selecting all these ones next to each other is because I'm sloppy my color. So, I don't want to drag my brush strokes. Oh, see that? Right there. That's because I didn't mess with my thresholds. So, it's cool though. I will fix that in a second. But for right now, let's go ahead and add our black. There we go. There we go. Alright. Now, that little part that I filled in that I didn't want to, all I'm going to do is keep it selected and run my eraser over it. Oh, too much eraser. Yeah, there we go. Alright, bring it back to the layer with the top, and bam. And let's go ahead and grab these guys as well. Okay, so back down to our color layer. And drag and drop. Drop. Drag and drop. Let's check my layer again because I am no paranoid. Alright. Get out our brush again. In black. Alright, here we go. Filling it in where it touches the middle. And that's good. Got a little bit into this little section right here. Not to worry, because this is going to get some black highlights. Yeah. Alright. Let's back up here to our outline layer. This spot? Nope, not that one yet. This spot. Alright, here's a good example of brush holds. So let's back it up for a second. Now, if you're not familiar with Procreate and you're using this as a tutorial to learn, a gesture of just 2 fingertips, bam, takes you backwards. So now, we want to select only this area right. Okay, well that didn't work. Okay, I was trying to show you an example. Let's go to a brush. Right, this area right in here. That didn't work out. Never mind. Ignore me. So, let's go ahead and select this area right here. We're going to hit it with the tip of our pencil. And I'm just going to drag that threshold over to the right until I fill as much area as possible without breaking into that area. Alright, so 98.9 is too far. 98.8 is pretty good. So let's run with that. Alright, select these other ones that we want to get. Alright, that looks pretty good right now. So, let's go ahead and start coloring. Drag that red down into it. Bam, bam, bam. Bam. Switch to black. Brush it out. Now this spot, I can do it from right here in the center if I want, or it'd even look good coming off one of the sides. But based on what side I do it on, I would probably want to change the direction of the insides of these petals that are right above it. So if I'm coming from the right on this side, I would want that. I would want to go from the left on the petal just above it that wraps to the inside. Alright, but I'm going to do from the center. So there's that. Now this one down here, I can go one of 2 ways. Come down from the top, or I can come from the bottom, and if that gets too dark, then you just grab your red. And, oh shit. See what I did there? Did it all on the wrong fucking layer. So, we'll go back and correct that in a second. But for right now, I will show you this example. Alright, so. Alright, here we go. Just go a little bit along the bottom there. Bam! It separates the bottom of this petal from the insides of these petals. So, I think that's pretty good. Which is too bad, because we have to back up, get rid of all that work we just did, so I can go on the appropriate layer. Bam. Bam. And yeah, I might be a little bit weird drawing on all these separate layers, but it will get even worse later on when I'm working on the more traditional NU-SKOOL versions, especially the NU-SKOOL version, because I layer up like a motherfucker. Usually I draw on 11 by 17 canvases, so I'm limited to 27 layers, I believe, and I always have to collapse layers down because I do too much. Alright, those are done. So back up here to the line work. Bam, bam. Yeah, let's just fill those and see what they look like. And instead of filling the areas like I am, you could always just use your brush tool, just color them in, but I think that it's easier just to drop it in. So, alright, let's shrink that down and take a look at it from a distance. That needs a little bit more, for sure. So, I'm just going to select one at a time here. A little bit of black. just going to leave that last one alone. Yep, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Now, we got all of these guys. Correction. It's funny that I'm trying to do a tutorial and everything is going wrong. Okay, so now that I've got all these selected, I'm just going to fill those with what I feel is a traditional kind of yellow. And this part I am going to just brush it on because it's much easier than dragging and dropping it. Alright, so that's that. Let's start doing some leaves. Now that we have the leaves all colored in, I'm just going to touch up the line of I'm going to do it right here, so I can see through it. And it's not okay. Here it is. Traditional rose tattoo design. Now, we can take it a little bit further if you like. A little bit of a background. I'm just going to find me my spray paints and let's do fat nozzle. Okay, so this is not part of the whole traditional tattoo thing, but I think that it looks nice. You just add a little bit on the outside. There we go. Traditional rose. So, that's it for today, and I will do another video of the neo-traditional, and then I'll do one of the NU-SKOOL rose. So, if you found this helpful, please go ahead and give it a like, and if you'd be so kind, share it, and maybe even subscribe to my channel, because I'm going to do many, many more of these tutorials, and because this one sucked so bad, verbally, then they can only get better. So yeah, do it. Click subscribe, and I'll see you next week. It's time for another rose tutorial, and this week I am tackling the neo-traditional rose. And neo-traditional just means new traditional, so it's an updated version of the classic. And neo-traditional artwork is just utilizing more colors and a little bit more attitude to the artwork. So using what we learned last week as kind of our base, we're going to just add on to that a little bit more and make it just a tiny bit more dynamic. We're going to add some more color, and yeah, it's going to be really cool. So go ahead, grab your pencil, and let's get to work. What I did was I started with a circle, and mine's a little bit oblong, but that's cool because I want it to be a little bit taller. Once I'm done with the circle, I've sketched the frontmost petals, and I've got one going across the center just like we did last week, and then I've got one that's falling underneath. It's kind of cradling the inside of the rose. Now let's add some more petals. So the ones that I'm doing right now are the ones that kind of hug the center of the rose, which is called the pistil. And the spiral portion that is showing right there is called the stigma. And so when I say stigma for the rest of this, I'm referring to the spiral portion in the center. The reason that I went with a spiral this time is because it's a good base. It allows you to know exactly where the center is,
because if you follow the stigma straight down, you end up at the calyx, which is not a term that you need to know, but it's important to be a little bit educated on the artwork that you're doing. So with a rose, its structure all starts from a single point, the calyx, and everything grows out from there. So when you're drawing, if your petals are too far to the outside, it's noticeable because all those petals should originate from that center point. So if it helps, go ahead and draw that line that goes straight down and hits your base. Put a little star there, or maybe scribble a little circle and fill it in. But if you know exactly where your center point, where your growth point is, then it makes the structure a little bit easier to manipulate. But enough about the center of the rose. Let's talk about these cupped petals that go around the outside. I'm going to do a little example for you. They don't have to be one specific way. You can kind of decorate them however you want. And the beauty of it is that you can make a neo-traditional rose kind of however the hell you want. So long as you're using clean, bold black lines and things remain somewhat flat. I am, of course, referring to colorations, which we'll dive into a little bit later in the video. But for right now, let's talk about these petals a little bit. So I like to draw kind of almost like a half circle, and I'll put a little point to the end of it. That point is more of a reference for me than anything. So as I'm sketching it in right now, you can see how I'm using that center point in conjunction with those reference lines that I drew earlier. Figure out how you want your petals to overlap, and once you've got everything kind of dialed in the way that you want it, you can go in and refine a little bit further. So I've just added a couple of little bite marks from bugs, and I hooked that front petal just a tiny bit more because I think that it looks a little bit more appealing. Really take the time with your sketch and make sure that everything falls into place the way that you want it. Because once you get beyond this, especially if you're on paper, it's really difficult to take back something. So at this point, I am happy with where I'm at for my rose design, so I'm adding in the leaves around the outside. And here's a little reference. I'm just trying to kind of figure out which type of leaf I want to go with. And here's some examples of the way that I've drawn them in the past. And this one's a little bit more new school than what we're looking for, but I really like doing these serrated leaves. They're, I don't know, they just look badass. So I'm just going to sketch it in real quick and show you what they could look like, but maybe we'll use that for the new school drawing. And of course, you can throw some little veins in the leaves. But that's enough messing around. Let's get serious. So for this project, I am simply going to make my center line, bring a point off that line, and then kind of make a little bit of a curve going back. The backside of the leaf is going to be pretty much the same. It's going to get rid of that center point, and it will be a little bit concave on the top, but it's about the same width, and it just kind of gently curves back the same as the front side. Now, you can draw your leaves however the hell you want, but this is just how I'm going to do it. Because it's relatively simple, it's easy to reproduce over and over without actually tracing over the leaf to make them perfect. And it will leave enough space at the end of this to put the color transition that I want to in here. Now, the way that I color is going to be a little bit outside of the realm of neo-traditional, but hey, if people want to judge me on it, then they can make their own tutorial videos. At this point, I'm just going to start lining this thing. The big thing here is just make sure that the lines are black and clean. And you can get away with various line weights in this, but for me, I think that just a thicker line is more appealing, and it's easier to read from a distance. I think that's enough talking for now, so let's go ahead and speed this up because I'm pretty sure that outlines are very straightforward. Here's a little part of the drawing that I didn't quite like after I got it all lined out. So because I'm on the iPad, so what? I can get away with this. But if you're drawing on paper, you kind of gotta live with mistakes like this. And if you don't like something, either you dedicate yourself to it or you start over. And I've been there plenty of times and it sucks. So let's go ahead and do some veins in these leaves, and once we're done with that, we get to move on to some color. So let's go ahead and bring up our palette. So these are the colors I plan on using: greens, teals, and I will put a little bit of orange at the tip of the leaves, which is fun, but it's one of those things that people are gonna be like, oh, that's not neo-traditional. Well, fuck off. It's the way that I like to do it, and yeah, it makes it more fun. For those of you who are using Procreate on the iPad, first of all, congratulations on your purchase. It's a super good move. Anyways, when using Procreate, you can select the areas that you want to fill in. So long as your outlines are closing off the area completely, you can select the area. Oh, this was the part where I decided, I don't like these teals. Anyways, you can select the area and just drag from the upper right hand corner where your little color selector is right into the area that you want your color to be, and boom, it's like a paint bucket tool on Photoshop. And that's how I like to operate. Just drag and drop, or you can just hit fill layer. And let's talk a little bit about the way that I'm coloring now. When tattooing, I almost always work dark through the medium tones and into the light ones. But for this, I'm starting light and then I'm bringing it through my medium tones and then up to black. So the reason that I'm working in reverse is just because I want to keep my layers minimal, and normally if I was doing this for like a real project, I would have probably 4 layers per petal. But I'm trying to keep things as simple as possible, and so I'm doing it all on 1, maybe 2 layers, just to keep everything kind of split up. I like to use this ink wash brush that I've got, and it's not something that is standard on Procreate, but you can hop online and find it. But you can use your airbrushes if you want. Soft airbrush works great, but what I find is that if I'm using a brush that is perfect and smooth, then I will sit there and go over things dozens of times just to make sure that everything has that perfect transition, like it's a gradient on Photoshop. But with something that's imperfect, it allows me to just kind of go a little bit quicker because I don't have to worry about making everything like absolutely perfect, and you can't see where one color starts and one color ends because it's meant to be a little bit distressed looking, and it's a really neat look, and I think that it is beneficial to have that in the finished product because then it doesn't necessarily look like it's digital. it kind of looks like you may have done it with marker. And I used to work with marker, so it looks great. Here's another example of kind of pushing the envelope and what is neo-traditional and what isn't. So there's going to be artists out there that say that because I'm not using black line work, that this is no longer neo-traditional artwork, that it becomes illustrative, which is fine, and it might be true, but the idea here isn't to define what is and what isn't neo-traditional. This is more about just kind of spicing up the artwork and taking a very common tattoo image and making it new, making it more modernized. And yes, if you want to call it illustrative, then great, go ahead. But it is a graduation from traditional style artwork. And next time we'll take that even further and we'll get a little bit obnoxious with it. Okay, so my rose is pretty much finished, minus the highlights, which I'm going to knock out right now. So the way that I approach highlights is a little bit odd and totally not necessary, but it's an approach that I really like. So what I did was I added a new layer, and I'm going over top of the areas that have all these lines. And I just kind of slop some paint on there, and then I trim it with my eraser tool. Once I've got it trimmed and at the shape that I want it, then I'll go through with my eraser again, but I will take it from a sharp airbrush to, or correction, I will take it from a hard airbrush to a soft airbrush. And once I have the soft airbrush, I will just barely brush over top of it really gently and lighten all that down. And it just kind of makes it look a little bit glossy as opposed to like a hard white highlight. So I know that I'm talking a little bit about it before we actually get to the point, but you'll be able to see my steps in just a second. So I've still got quite a ways to go on these highlights. So I thought it'd be a good time to talk about the differences between tattooing this image and doing it digitally. So there's a lot of stuff that I can do on the iPad that I'm not going to be able to accomplish on skin. And if you're familiar with my work, you might be like, you know what, like, that's bullshit, because I've seen what you can do on skin and it looks great. That would be because I favor saturation of colors way more than line work. So all these lines in the petals, yep, they're gone, they're donezo. So instead of doing those, I would just make sure that I packed as much color into those petals as possible to make them stand out. Time to do some leaves. Now with this, I like to do something that's a little bit different. So those are my colors that I'm going to be using for this, and obviously I'll use black as well, but I've got those three greens that I'm going to start with the lightest green, bump it up to the medium, and then again to the dark green before going to black. Then on the opposite end, on most of them, on the opposite end, I'll put a little bit of that orange, and it just really makes it stand out. If I wanted to make it pop even more, then instead of orange, I might have used violet, which is a tertiary color, as is teal, as is amber. So you get the three of them together, and pow, it just really jumps out at you. The same goes for like primary colors, blue, red, and yellow. You use those together and you're going to have something that's visually striking. Same goes for those secondary colors, green, purple, and orange. It's what I like to call the trifecta, and you will see it a lot in my artwork because I fucking love colors. But too much color can be overpowering, and you never want to do that. So, that's a whole nother thing, and I don't have time to discuss it because I'm at the end of my artwork. And I'm just going to put a little shadow in here. Thank you for watching. I, of course, am the Tattoo Robot, and please join me next week for the third part of my rose tutorial series, where I will go over the new school version of the rose. Please click like if you think that you got something of value from this video, and of course, subscribe because that'd be awesome. Thank you. Hello, I'm the Tattoo Robot, and today let's do another rose drawing tutorial. Today I'm working on the new school rose. So to start things off, I just drew a quick little cylinder, or kind of a pill shape, and I gave it a slight bend to the front. Once I had that in there, then I started shaping my petals. I wanted to make it look as if the inner petals were hugging that cylinder, which I will then turn into the center of the rose, which, if you joined me for the last rose tutorial, you'll recall is called the stigma. Now, with new school artwork, the big thing is just making things a little bit larger than life. Make them exaggerated and just stand out, grab the attention. Some might refer to it as being cartoony, which is completely accurate. It was actually derived from graffiti artwork. So, anyways, let's get back into this drawing. Now I'm drawing the petals coming off from it, and I'm making them very sharp and very angular. When you're attempting to do new school artwork, the biggest thing that I can suggest is make things as exaggerated as possible, but not so much that the subject matter becomes lost and isn't recognizable. If you're looking for something that is fun and dynamic, then new school is the way to go. And it can be a little bit weird to draw, so practice makes perfect, and just keep at it. My line work for this one is pretty straightforward, but with new school you can get away with doing a bit more. And back in the day, I used to bulk up my line work and just give really thick lines in the foreground, and then as it went back I made them thinner. But shaping lines like that isn't really all that popular anymore. But I still tend to get out a thicker liner for the line work that goes around the outside of a tattoo, and then for the stuff that goes inside of it, I break out something a little bit thinner. Another fun thing to do inside of a specific subject within a tattoo is colored line work, but I'm not here to talk about that, but it is fun, so yeah, keep that in mind. But anyways, let's talk about the coloring. For this project I decided to go with a nice bright purple. It's almost fuchsia, but anyways, new school artwork really relies on bright contrasting colors. So to do that, I'm doing my rose in purple, I'm going to do my leaves in green, and I will implement some orange into the next portion of the project. But for right now, I'm just focusing on the rose, so I don't need all these secondary colors to pop off from each other. Also, when I get to the leaves, I'm only going to draw one, and the reason for that is because I don't want to congest my artwork just yet, because I do have that plan later on for other artwork. So, don't want those leaves getting in the way. I'm not explaining the way that I draw or color because I'm assuming that you already watched my other 2 rose tutorials, and those talk a little bit more about what exactly I'm doing in the program that I'm using. But this next part, it's kind of a comparison. You're going to notice that I'm adding a lot more shape to these petals, and that's because I don't want them to fall flat. I want to give them as much attitude as possible, and to do that I'm adding some folds in the petals, but I'm not doing it as if they would be like out in nature. I'm doing it as if it's kind of a rough plastic rose. So it's got a little thickness to the petals and it's really rigid looking. Now that's just the way that I prefer to draw it. Doesn't mean that that's how you have to do it, but also this is just kind of a guide to get you started. It's time to do some highlights, and for this I made sure that I added another layer so I could get real sloppy with my white, not interfere with the other colors when I go in to erase that down. Now, the way that I'm using my highlights, it's to show that there's a high point compared to the rest of the petal. It's not a flat petal, it's not smooth along one edge, it is imperfect. It's got some crumply petals and ridges, and I want to accentuate those to make the drawing that much more interesting. Now the rest of the petals are pretty much the same concept as these initial ones, so I'm going to speed things up a little bit and I'll slow it down again once we get to the end and I can explain a couple of the finer details to you. Let's slow it down for a moment. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just erasing this thin little bit next to the edge, and it's just to make sure that if I have something that's real dark that bumps up to the bottom side of this, they don't blur together and things don't get lost. And it looks super cool. So yeah, that's why I did that. Now I'm adding some shadows with a medium hard airbrush, and that just kind of keeps the edges a little bit soft so that it's not too harsh. So I'm just kind of adding those underneath where I think that they would be based on not only the distance from the petal above, but also the curvature of the petal that I'm working on. Once I've got those in there and I'm happy with where they're at, then I go to my opacity and just bump that down a little bit so it's not super dark and overpowering. Alright, now to add some leaves. The final product will not have leaves on it because this is only the first step for a larger project. So I don't want to put leaves on here and then have to go in and take them out later on. So I'm just going to draw a quick example of what I'm thinking the leaves should look like for this particular project. And following the theme of the petals, I've exaggerated them a little bit and twisted them ever so slightly to make it look like they are kind of lifting off the paper and they're not just flat against it. And here's the final product, a big ass purple NU-SKOOL rose. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments below and I would be more than happy to reply to them. If you happen to use this tutorial to draw your own, please share a link to that picture. I would love to see it. And here it is again with its predecessors. I hope that you learned something from these tutorials. I know that I had a great time drawing them for you. Thank you for watching. My name is Matt, the Tattoo Robot. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you aren't already. Thank you.